So today I had a chance to talk to one of the guys from the YouTube channel called WebDM, Jim Davis. And I'm just going to give you a heads up. The first 10 minutes of the podcast, there is some background noise, but it's going to be eliminated and hopefully you'll enjoy the podcast. So I can't remember what this episode is called, what number it is, but I'm kind of starstruck at the moment because today I have the 50% of the WebDM with me here today, Jim Davis. Or is it James Davis?
Jim Davis is fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that'll work.
When I started getting into Dungeons and Dragons, what is it, 3 years ago, I'm kind of a late bloomer. I kind of scoured the internet for finding some information about this DM role because I wanted to introduce it to my friends. And then I found your YouTube channel, and it just sucked me in.
Well, that's great. That's great. I mean, we sort of started it with the idea of the late bloomer in mind. You know, Pruitt and I have been playing since, gosh, it feels like all my life. And I've been playing RPGs since I was like at least 10 or 11. I'm almost 38 right now. So a great long time. And then most of that, about 2/3 of that time, has been spent playing with Pruitt. So we have this YouTube channel where we're like, well, maybe there's new people out there that would just want to hear from some people who've been playing for a while, like what the game's like and how it works. And then it just sort of snowballed out of control. And we find ourselves here like 3-ish years later with a really big YouTube channel, a lot of influence, and a rather large audience, and also looking around going like, I have no idea who anyone is who listens to us, or whether I'm assuming what we do is useful and people get inspired by it and can take the perspectives that we offer and then like build something for themselves and find a way of playing the game that works for them, instead of like those YouTube channels where it's like, oh, if you're playing a game this way, you're doing it wrong, or this particular class option or spell or rule or whatever sucks. And we wanted more to be like, every table's different, and you should think about how you like to play the game and what you like about it, instead of like playing it our way. We're not here to tell you how to play your game. So that's kind of a brief overview of WebDM.
It is quite interesting, audio episode. As late of today, I was going through the episode of the Tarrasque, just to see what it has to offer, and you bring all these ideas of how to like merge it into a campaign.
Yeah.
So it's quite inspiring to watch.
Oh, thank you.
So you have been playing D&D for almost all of your life. Have you tried any other like the D&D something that's similar to it, like Pathfinder or something?
Yeah, I actually didn't start with Dungeons and Dragons. I started with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, that game from the United Kingdom where it's like very gritty and gruesome and people go insane, and it's kind of like taking the ideas behind Call of Cthulhu and putting them into Dungeons and Dragons. I played that for years, played Star Wars, and I found actually when I started playing with Pruitt was when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. I joined a group that he was a part of, and the Dungeon Master was so terrible and just like such a pain to play with that I just decided, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to DM, and nobody had any objections. Not even the Dungeon Master at the time. He was fine to switch over to be a player. So, so I played a lot of them. I haven't actually. I played Pathfinder once. I ran a game right before 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons came out of Pathfinder, and my group was just like tired of all of the feats and the skill points and little incremental bonuses here and there. It just wasn't a game for us. More power to the people that enjoy it, though. I'm glad they've got their game.
So The idea for our talk today was world building.
Yeah.
So, how do you approach world building?
Ooh, if I'm,
it's a very broad question. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I approach it in one of two ways based on what I want out of it. Sometimes it's for myself, and I will use it incidentally for a game that I'm running. And in that sense, I do more of like the traditional, a big setting Bible or campaign primer, lots of detail on the history of the world and the backstory of it. I have a master's in history, specifically military history, and so a lot of my world building that I do for myself comes from that kind of perspective. It's about the big wars and political movements and the politics of a setting, kind of like very traditional sort of big man of history for my campaign settings, and maybe a tenth of that gets used in a game world to like drive an actual session of play. That's one way that I do it, and then another way is where I do very minimal, just sort of think of a concept or an idea or a mood that I want the world to evoke, and I watch a lot of media that will evoke those emotions in me. So I like find movies and TV, listen to music that gets me in the mood, and then provide just enough detail that I then can present like a 1 to 2 page setting primer to the players, and they can start building characters on it. And once the players are introduced, the world really comes to life, because now I know exactly what the party's going to be interested in. I know exactly what areas of the world I should set it, what kind of adventures I should prepare for the party. Whereas the other style of world building is sort of like, it's not necessarily built or meant to be used in a game. It's more like, hey, you can use it. A lot of RPG products are like that, where you get like a great big 200, 300 page campaign setting with all kinds of details and stuff like that. And maybe there's gameable material in it that you could spin out into a session or something, but a lot of it's just sort of fake history and make believe, fun for its own sake, and I think good practice for people who want to world build, or whether it's for a game or something else. But when it comes to playing the game of Dungeons and Dragons or any other RPG, the settings that I create for those campaigns are very focused on the game itself. And then after however many sessions of play, the setting has changed, it's different, it's had the player's hands in it. I leave a lot of areas blank, whether they're like literally on the map, they're blank, there's nothing there, or like conceptually, so that the players have a chance to fill in some of that. And it's one of my favorite things about playing Dungeons and Dragons, is that collaborative world building that can go on.
You mentioned the setting primer.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that should be very limited in? Yeah.
I try to keep it under 2 pages for myself, and that's with images. I try to include images as well, either a portion of the map that I've created, or several evocative images for it. But a campaign primer that I'll give to a prospective group of players will have like a bullet pointed list of sort of the big picture points of the world. It'll have maybe a paragraph or 2 detailing sort of like, this is the kind of campaign world this is. This is, dark, gritty, sort of Dungeons and Dragons type survival horror, or this is a more lighthearted fantasy adventure. I might say something like that. And then a portion of that document will be dedicated to specifics of how to make a character for that campaign. So if I created a custom rule or a background or a custom race or something, I'd include it there. But it's short, just because I've been on the other end of a dungeon master handing me like a 13-page handwritten thing, and it's just like it's clear they poured their heart and soul into it.
You just like slowly exhale.
Yeah,
and then read.
Am I going to read this? And so I really try to keep it short, concise, interesting, and get to the point. The point is the players want to know how to make a character, and if there's anything they need to keep in mind when making a character. So that's usually what I do. And then I'll have like a version that's for myself only that has the secret DM information and things like that in it. But even that's maybe only 6 or 7 pages. It's not that long.
I'm just gonna pause.
Sure.
It sounds like someone is vacuuming.
On my end?
Yeah.
Let me see real quick. I have a air conditioner running. Let me turn it off real quick.
That's much better.
Is that better?
It's way better. Thank you.
All right. Sure.
It just kept getting louder and louder and louder. I was like, oh no.
Sometimes it's very quiet and you can barely hear it.
Yeah,
and other times it's not so much.
And on pause. All right, so where did we get to? This talk actually kind of is very good for me because I am running a campaign tomorrow for my sister and her new boyfriend. So they like wanted to experience the world of Dungeons and Dragons because I have been bragging about how great the game is. But I have had some experience before by being the game master. And one thing I have experienced is that the first game I tried to make was very like fleshed out to the bone. You can like see the skin clearly. You can see where the eye sockets were. But one thing I really have learned is that, okay, let's just make them start in a tavern, and then I have this idea that they can go over here. So is that something you agree with, that you don't have to like over prepare?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, over prep is probably in both my own personal experience as a dungeon master and in watching other dungeon masters over the course of, say, a campaign. Over prep is one of those things that'll lead to burnout and to feeling like you're doing so much work for so little return. And if you're the kind of person to look at your week and go, man, I've only got, say, 8 hours of free time in a week. You're working, you've got a family, you've got other things going on. This is just a hobby that you engage in a couple hours. Then you might think that, yeah, I mean, I don't want to have to take like a full day's worth of work just for a few hours of a game. And part of what we tried to do on our YouTube channel is point people towards a style of play that works for their lives. And over prep is one of those things where it's like, all you really need is a place for the party to recuperate, a place for the party to go have an adventure. They may be one in the same location, particularly if it's like an urban campaign or something like that. And then you build out from there as you need it. There's a reason the classic sort of small village with a dungeon within 1 day's walking distance was the model for so long. And it's cliched, and there are plenty of groups where that's not enough. They want something different. But like that model of place to rest, place to have an adventure, and then a transition between those two if you want it is, I think, a good way to start a game. And then, I tried to start a new group last year. It didn't work out because our work schedules didn't really align. But for the 6 or 7 times we got to play, they checked out a haunted tomb, adventured around and got involved in some local like goblin politics.
As one does.
Well, you never know. I was just like, oh, maybe they'll like be like most D&D players and kill the goblins, but no, they decided to talk to them instead. So I went with it. But after about 4 or 5 adventures, they were like, hey, we're really kind of not feeling this haunted tomb anymore. We want to try out something different. And that's when I said, like, well, let's just do a time passage, and then we'll move to a different location. And we had some urban adventures before, our schedules just didn't match up. And so I think that leads to a more satisfying game on everybody's part, because it's less work for the dungeon master. Like you're saying, you probably poured your heart and soul into that fleshed out setting, and you probably spent like a ton of time with it.
It was so great.
And right, it's your baby. It's your perfect thing. It is. Yeah. And I know exactly what that feeling's like. And so it's one of those things where, like, you can do that, and if you've got the time and the passion for it, I would never want to tell a dungeon master you shouldn't. But like I said, it's one of those things where I hear from and I see in my own experience a lot of dungeon masters who over prep and doing too much, particularly like in the wrong direction. The party goes left, all you prepared for was right. That it leads to a lot of things that end up on places like, bad RPG stories or RPG horror threads that you sometimes see online, where people just gripe about their dungeon master or fellow players. And I think just having a place that grows as the campaign grows, and if you need it to be bigger than it is, then you make it bigger than it is. And if the party wants to go in a different direction, you just have to stay one step ahead of them, not like 100 steps ahead of them. So yeah, that's mostly the kind of advice that I give to those dungeon masters.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing tomorrow. I have this idea where they start in like a town like that's governed by dwarves, and then every night demon comes and roam the earth and kills everything that isn't protected by a circle. So that's like the main plot. I haven't done any more detailed, but probably gonna do like an hour before they come tomorrow and just like scribble down some NPCs and do some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when you kind of think about it, particularly if you're not playing on like an 8-hour session. Most of my youth was spent playing in 8 to 12-hour sessions. Of course, I had that kind of time. Whereas now they're more 2 to 3 hours. You need some evocative NPCs. Players remember those, whether it's funny voices or just an interesting personality quirk. Good NPCs will bring a game session to life and can showcase the world that you've built, right? Like if NPCs strongly tied into a feature of your world, you have a chance to like bring to the forefront those elements that you've been working on in your what I see sometimes called lonely fun, which I don't like that term, but that work of just being a dungeon master and preparing a setting and world building. Having an NPC that can reflect one of those elements lets you showcase these things that you just, as a dungeon master, you work on by yourself, and you can have the players read them in a setting Bible, maybe, or you can base an NPC around something of it and have that be a memorable NPC, and now they remember like, oh, that's tied into this setting element, and creates a more evocative setting for them.
I actually had a talk with Chris Avalone on this podcast, and we talked about Final Fantasy VII. Have you played it?
I have not. I was
Okay.
I was around and playing video games at the time, but Final Fantasy has never been one of those franchises that hooked me.
So,
I'm aware of the big plot elements of it, though. Yeah.
Spoilers ahead. There's this girl called Aerith. And she's this NPC that, or she's a team member that you pick up. And one thing that Chris pointed out was that her character is actually one of the only character in the game that when she have you can like put gems into sockets to like combine stuff and so on. And she's the only one who could fit in more gems or so on. So everyone who played Final Fantasy VII were playing Aerith because she could like buff the team very quickly, and then players became connected to this character, and then she just got killed off. So it had a very emotional response. The thing I'm getting at is, do you have any NPCs or like some kind of characters coming into your games that you have your party being very connected to, and then just and she fell off a cliff?
Yeah, or worse. I think it's a. I mean, NPCs can be a really important tool that way. So let's say you've got a group of relatively new players, and you want to include an NPC in the party that is helpful to them, maybe is like a really iconic for their class or something. No one in the party made a wizard, for instance. And so you include a wizard NPC so that the rest of the players can see, like, oh, this is what a wizard would do. If a lot of the advantages of playing with a group of new players is if everyone picks a different class, they all get to experience each other's classes vicariously and get a better picture of the game. And you can do the same with an NPC. But you run the risk of like that NPC overshadowing the party, or like the players sort of looking to that NPC as a source of wisdom or guidance. And I'm a big advocate for just brutally murdering those NPCs in the worst ways possible. Just, it serves an interesting function. If you're playing with people who are not used to like the blood and guts meat grinder Dungeons and Dragons, where you go through several characters over the course of a game, and life is cheap and resurrection is difficult to come by. That's one style of playing, but I found that a lot of new players, that they're not like, their own character's death is like, they're just terrified of it. They don't want it to happen. They get anxious about it. And for those, it's like, for those players, you want to present them a picture of a world that's, if it's deadly, then have it be deadly. But, you don't want to discourage them from taking risks. So you can kill off an NPC that's beloved by the party, and that you get the nice emotional resonance from that as they sort of mourn that loss. You get to impress upon them the deadliness of the world or the situation that they find themselves in, and it's a good time to like take the training wheels off, right? Like that NPC had been a crutch for a while, and now the party has to survive on their own. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. It's the trick for that is like getting the players to really attach themselves to an NPC. A lot of times it's you just have to dangle a bunch out there and see which ones they bond with.
It's kind of world building all in all is kind of a great addiction, if there is such a thing as a great addiction. But I think it's one of the most fulfilling, at least to me, most of the fulfilling hobbies I have so far. Because you have total control, and then you hand it to your players and they just wreck it.
Yes.
it's very I can say it's fun to watch people play in something you made. So I kind of feel like a game developer in a sense.
I mean, in some ways you are, particularly as a dungeon master. I think that it's worthwhile for everyone who wants to be a dungeon master. Like, there's some where it's like, I'll run a game if I need to, or I'll try this out. But once you know this is for you, and this is like your preferred way of playing, it's really worthwhile to take a look at what game developers do and how they make decisions, because you'll find yourselves in situations where you've got to make those judgment calls, or your players want to do something that's not in a rule book, or any number of things could happen, right? And so like thinking along the lines of like, I'm a game designer both in terms of the rules and like my understanding of them, but I'm also a game designer in terms of like building this playground we're all playing in. And so I think you're right about that. You are kind of a game designer once you step behind the screen and get into it.
So you made this campaign called The Land Between Two Rivers. Is it a campaign you're running currently?
Currently, yes.
Yeah.
I run it on our Twitch channel, WebDM Twitch. I think it's just WebDM on the Twitch platform. And it's at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Thursdays. And we have another one, Pruitt, the other co-host of WebDM, has his own thing that he runs on Tuesdays at the same time. But so we play it. We are Land Between Two Rivers, I think, is in its 13th or 14th game session. Mm-hmm. So we just started back in, I think, maybe March. It's a campaign world that I'd been letting build and sort of, I describe it as marinating. A lot of my campaigns, the timeline between sort of the first idea I have for it and when we actually sit down to make characters to play is often like a year or longer that I will let a campaign just sort of sit in my brain and sort of return to it every once in a while and think about it and do some writing on it and everything. So I've done the same with Land Between Two Rivers. It has a lot of influences in it, and in a lot of ways, this is my first homebrew that I've done for 5th edition. Most of the other campaigns I've run in 5th edition have been with the pre-generated adventures. The ones that Wizards of the Coast puts out. So I ran Tyranny of Dragons, I ran Out of the Abyss, and then after Out of the Abyss, I decided I was only going to run my own homebrews again. And so Land Between Two Rivers is the first one of those that I was like, this is 100% my own creation. I don't use any monsters from the monster manual. I'm in the process of like creating all subclasses for the classes. Like
That's
I want
extensive.
This to be it is. I want this to be a total like. If you want to play Land Between Two Rivers, this is what you would need. Obviously, we're WebDM. We want to, we put all this out eventually into a book that others could buy and hack up and use it any way they want. But right now, it's in this phase of like establishing what the setting is and how it gets played. I had my own ideas for it, but like I said, I left a lot of parts deliberately vague so that the players could have their own impact on it, and they already have. Even after 13 and 14, I really forget which one. Well, we've done 13 regular, like, we play with the same characters, sort of sequential game sessions, and then we've had a one-shot with different characters and a different DM even, so I had a chance to play in my own homebrew. We actually did that last night, so that was pretty fun. So
I could imagine that.
Yeah, it's not often that you do get a chance to like have one of your players say like, I'll run a game in this world, and you get a chance to experience your campaign setting in a different from a different angle. So it was really fun. And so the campaign is already, like, based on what I initially envisioned it as and what it is now after only, like, say 2.5 months of playing, is completely different. And for the better. It really is one of those things where I think the more hands on deck, then the more perspectives you're going to get on your world, and then it's going to add layers and depth, and you're going to be surprised. And so I'm excited for it. I really like the world itself. I envisioned it as something different than traditional Dungeons and Dragons, and from the ground up, everything that I wanted to include in it was meant to be like, this is not for the traditional elf, dwarf, halfling, Tolkien trio that gets in a lot of fantasy. This isn't about, there's no sweeping forests and plains and tall castles. It's desert. It's broken and ruined and post-apocalyptic, and all of the traditional races of Dungeons and Dragons that are the great civilizations of Greyhawk and Faerun and these other published settings, they're all gone. The elves took to the plains and left. The humans are, as far as anyone knows, extinct. No one's seen a dwarf in 2 centuries at least. They left, and so the world itself is this kind of broken, damaged, and dying place that these traditional evil, monstrous sort of humanoids, orcs, goblins, gnolls, and the like, are left to pick up the pieces. And so the players will play as orcs and tieflings and all of the traditional villainous humanoids of Dungeons and Dragons, and explore, like, well, we these are people who've been cast as villainous and evil for most of their fake history. Now they inherited a world in which those people that cast them as that have ruined it, and so it's been fun to kind of play through that. And some of the players have kind of picked up on that. Others of it just sort of, that idea just kind of sits quietly in the background. But an example of how, like, my own intention for the world and how it changes once play starts is, like I said, there's no humans, no humans, no elves, no dwarves. Like, if it's a traditional fantasy race, it's off limits. Well, I get one of my players that says, I want to play a human. So,
it's no.
So, because she told me, she says, I always play orcs and tieflings. She was like, she said, in every campaign, I'm always a monster. I'm always a whatever. She's like, I'd like to play a human. And so I said, I'll say yes if you can come up with a really cool reason for why there would be a human. And I offered her some suggestions, and she got back to me with her own. And she decided that her human was a clone that she was made somewhere, and described this wizard who, she was just like, I have a wizard who cloned me. I don't know why. I don't know how many of them there are. I don't know what purpose I was made for, but here I am, a human. And so she's the only one, and the party has kind of rallied around her as their mascot. And each of the party members has their disagreements with each other. They often go in their separate ways. The party splits up all the time in this one, but they all feel a fierce protection for this human in their midst that they have adopted as their collective daughter, basically. And so what this one thing that I was like, yeah, there's no humans because I want this to be, something different. Having a player who is like, I will make this interesting. I will make this thing that was banned fit into this world. And it's really been a big driver of keeping the party together, of them all forming close bonds with each other, and like that sweet spot of D&D where the party starts to realize what their capabilities are when they work as a team. And find ways to reinforce each other's imaginations and things that things that they're creating for their character is a magic moment in campaign, and it's come together really nicely. Really glad for it.
So how do you handle when a team separates? I'm asking pure what do you call it, like, interest in how do you do it, because I have encourage my players to stay together at all costs.
It's one of those, the party is stronger together, and in a lot of situations that splitting the party is dangerous. I let these players do it because they're all veteran players, and they're not all veteran, but they're all skilled at sort of playing their characters. But practically speaking, I try to keep the scene focused on whoever's split away at a minimum time, so 10 to 15 minutes max. Whatever the thing they're trying to accomplish in that exact moment, let them try to accomplish it. Look for a way to end on a note of tension or uncertainty, and then switch back to another group. So an example might be the rogue has gone ahead of the party to scout down the dungeon corridor. They're creeping along, make a stealth check, make a perception roll, describe how you're moving about, maybe disarm a trap, and then say, rogue, you hear footsteps approaching you from the darkness ahead. Okay, rest of the party, what do you guys do? And so now they are, they're like, what am I doing? How do I, they're checking their character sheet, they're looking up abilities, they're trying to think of ways to resolve this unknown situation. We cut back to the party, all right, guys, you guys don't know anything that just happened there. Your rogue hasn't come back yet. And so I just make sure that I keep it fast. It's practice, it just takes even like making sure I have like a timer or a stopwatch nearby for me so that I know how long I've been focused on one individual, so that the rest of the party doesn't get bored, basically.
So when do you make a map for the game?
I love maps so much.
It's something that, like, when you have you either do map first, like you said, okay, here's the capital and there's all these other things around it, or you do like, okay, I have this campaign, maybe it's time to like pull in a map or something.
Yeah. I do early on. I'll make a sketch of a map. Now these maps evolve over time. So for instance, for Land Between Two Rivers, the only thing I knew about it consistently from each map to map was that there were two rivers that meet, and that was it. And one of them was named the Horn, and the other one was named the Hound. And like I don't even have a name for the river for when they combine and become one river. But I have a sketch of a map. I maybe put some locations on it. By this time, if I'm world building, I at least have an idea for the feel of a campaign that I want, and have started to, for Land Between Two Rivers, it was like rewatching all the Mad Max movies. I wanted a particular moment of like in the newest one, Fury Road. It's like, what if that was a D&D scene, right? Like, what if the chase through the desert on all those cars and trucks was D&D-ified, and it was like big monsters and beasts and the party desperately fighting off waves of smaller, faster enemies that are trying to get on board their great big lumbering dinosaur dragon thing that they're riding across the desert. And so like that was the first image of this campaign in my mind when I was probably watching Fury Road, the movie, where I was like, oh, this would be a really cool D&D moment. And then backtracking from there, going like, well, what kind of world would fit that scene? And then I jotted down some notes. Land Between Two Rivers stuck in my head because it has a certain mythical feel to it. It evokes like the Tigris and Euphrates. It evokes a kind of a sense of a pre-civilization that has yet to form. And at the same time, it's post-apocalyptic, so it's building on the ruins of the prior world that had come before it. And I like deliberately leaned into that. I use a lot of images of the Tigris and Euphrates, or the surrounding deserts and landscapes that they run through, as well as parts of the American Southwest with all the great like big tall cactuses and giant just like red stone sort of these massive mesas and stone formations in the middle of the desert. So it's like images. It's sort of thoughts, images, map, and then the map will evolve as the campaign evolves. It's still evolving. I don't have a final form for the map yet.
If you like, or if you know your D&D maps from the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide, I have a little cool information that on the 29th of this month, I'm actually going to talk to Mike Slay.
Awesome.
The guy who make a lot of the maps in the player's handbook. So I think that's going to be a great talk as well.
That's really cool. That's awesome. His maps are really good.
I'm also quite astonished that he also wanted to talk, but apparently he's up for it.
Nice. Yeah. Excellent.
That's also something that I tend to do in my campaigns. I like to draw my own images as well, but I use Mike Slay's drawings a lot.
Yeah.
He has an extensive portfolio that is just sick.
Yeah.
So if anyone's listening, go to Mike Slay portfolio, pause the podcast, check his stuff out. It's very good.
It's very good, very good. His map of the Sword Coast is really cool. I wish I had like a big poster of that.
Yeah. Like just the whole wall.
Yeah.
Some tapestry or something.
yeah, just a big tapestry. Maybe I can get him to draw Land Between Two Rivers or something.
It's probably like very cheap.
Right.
So you have run this campaign for was it 14?
Yeah, I'm going to say 14 sessions. Yeah. This is not the first campaign that I've run in this world. The world actually got wrecked from two prior campaigns, where the first one was a very traditional fantasy. It was the first 3rd edition game I ever ran, and I came up with a drow vampire that was trying to blot out the sun, or like put a darkness spell between the sun and the earth. And the party was on track to stop the vampire and decided instead to pick a fight with a very powerful, very old red dragon, and it was a TPK. It was just a brutal TPK. Half the party in the middle of the fight dropped their weapons and pledged their undying loyalty to the dragon. That's how bad it had gone. And so the remaining few who were quite roughed up. So that campaign ended. I said, well, I guess the drow vampire succeeds. The next campaign was set 100 years later in a world that was covered in ice, and all the life on it had been destroyed and was ruled by drow and mind flayers and dark dwarves and the like. And the party was a bunch of paladins and great wizards who were calling on celestial allies to help them liberate the world. And they did, and we played out this whole big battle that raged across the world. And I kind of thought, after that campaign ended, I kind of thought, well, I bet that war probably lasted a lot longer than the campaign went on for, and just decided that between a century of having no sunlight and a period of planar scale magical conflict, that the world would just be utterly wrecked and so soaked with magic that it resembles an unreal place. So for an example of that, a house rule I have is if anyone uses a teleport effect, it has the potential to open a permanent portal just somewhere random. Well, the lowest teleport that players can get is a 2nd level spell. So it's one of those things where no one's triggered it yet, because I don't think anyone's teleported yet. But it is one of those things where if they do, the first time they do, and if they trigger a planar rift, it sort of reinforces that this place is not it's damaged and dying. And so I connect these prior two campaigns to the one I'm running now, because in the second campaign, one of the party members was a druid. And if your listeners maybe remember older versions of D&D, druids stopped aging. They could alter their shape. They could make themselves look like other people. They may very well be capable of doing this in 5th edition. I haven't played a high-level druid or seen one played yet. So I ruled that, okay, so this human druid survives this conflict, disguises himself as an orc, and founds this order of priests that are dedicated to restoring the world, which, but looping back to what we were talking about earlier about starting in a location and having that one location be their home base and then adventuring out from there, Trade Town and other locations in the Land Between Two Rivers are like that. They serve as the home base for the party, and they are this orc druid or this human who became an orc who founded this druidic order sort of provides a degree of stability and civilization for this otherwise very lawless, very cutthroat survival type world. And so I tried to build in some traditional structures of a D&D campaign. There's a town, there's places to gather there. There's a reason you start in a tavern, or a lot of games start in a tavern, because a tavern's a social setting that people can get to know one another, and if you don't want to dwell there, you just say you start and then you leave immediately or whatever. But it provides a place for the players to rally around if they want. And then I just made sure that the surrounding wasteland was just filled with ruins and lairs and monsters and conflicts and different factions that are fighting each other, so that any way the party might go, I don't have to wait for them to pick up a plot hook. It will come to them. So it's just kind of, I've learned that that's a style that I like, which is to build a very dense sandbox with a lot going on in it, waiting and seeing what the players latch onto and draws their interest, and then just going from there.
So, what is the longest campaign you have ever run? Because I saw like this guy on YouTube who had run a campaign for 35 years or something.
Yeah, I've heard of those. I've heard of those. I've read about a lot of them. Every now and then you come across someone who's like, oh yeah, we started in first edition, and then we have so many house rules that we don't even play D&D anymore. We play our very own custom kind of game. I've always wanted something like that, but that's not how my life worked out.
Yeah.
Most of my campaigns, my longest one I think was probably 2.5 years of continual play.
That's also quite a feat.
Yeah, I mean it was, and we were all like, it was one of those, we didn't finish the campaign because we literally showed up to play one day, and all of us looked around, was just like, let's just play something else. Like, the characters were so powerful, they weren't getting threatened anymore. They'd lost the kind of, they'd lost the thread of what was going on. Like, it was a very satisfying game, and it was it was better to just, like, everybody agreed to end it. Let's just end it and play something else. And we had a great time afterwards. We ran another great campaign immediately. But I find most of my games tend towards a year and a half lately. Whether that's because I was running a lot of Wizards of the Coast adventures, which are kind of, there's 2 of them a year. They don't want you. I guess they want you to finish one of them so you can buy the next one. But we kind of teased them out a bit longer, and of course I added a bunch of custom stuff even to the pre-made adventures. But I find now that I wish that I could be in a place where taking my time with a game was really possible, and of like, I really like a style of Dungeons and Dragons and role playing in general that is player driven and player led, and sometimes that eats up a lot of time while they determine what it is that they like or want to do, or they pursue things that are not really like, that are dead ends but are still fun nonetheless. And I like a style of game that doesn't have an end objective. There's not like a save the world or an overpowering enemy that needs to be defeated. I kind of like just a series of little adventures. Like, I guess a good analogy would be I like a collection of short stories as opposed to a novel. Is what I would like, and tend to run my games in that style. And I find that lets the players stretch their legs, and they don't feel like they're constantly being driven. Like the latest Wizards of the Coast adventure, Tomb of Annihilation, it involves like a death curse and people who were resurrected being, cursed with that, and that's some great evil that's returned to the world, and at the same time you've got to like make it through this very dense jungle that's filled with the same kind of enemies. And I've heard a lot of people, I get messages and emails all the time from them who are, who complain about that kind of thing, and who find it, exciting at first, but after 7 or 8 levels are just bored with it. And my opinion is, like, after 7 or 8 levels, you should have been done with whatever enemy you were fighting those first few, and on to the next enemy or plot or whatever. Like, keep it fresh and interesting, as opposed to like a great big story that you're trying to tell. Yeah.
So I have one last question before.
Sure. Yeah.
Why do you think that playing D&D in front of an audience, for example, you use Twitch. Why do you think it has become so popular lately? Because it hasn't been around for that long.
Right. Yeah. Gosh, I think Twitch and other live streaming platforms allow for something that previously, if you hadn't played Dungeons and Dragons and you wanted to know how it was played, you only had a handful of options. You could buy a rule book, and in every rule book there's this stupid little section where they're like an example of play. And every one of those I've read is like, this does not look like anything. This does not resemble the kind of games that I have both played in and dungeon mastered.
No.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah. Or you could find a group who would be willing to say, let you watch. I'd always had friends who didn't want to play Dungeons and Dragons, but they didn't want to not hang out. And so when I was younger, say my teens and early 20s, we'd play around like a friend's family dining room table or something like that. There's like 7 of us playing the game, and then 3 or 4 other people who are just in the house hanging out. And as a dungeon master, I would put them to work. I'd be like, hey, look up this rule for me, or you control this monster in combat. They didn't really want to sit down and play the game, but they'll roll the dice for me if I need it, things like that. So the idea of having someone at the table who isn't a participant but is watching never seemed odd. But it's only been recently that you either had a game group you knew who would let you do it as a way of joining them, or you would go to like a game store and watch someone else play. But then you're just sort of staring at strangers who, even though they're in a public place, haven't necessarily said like, oh yeah, let's just, please stare at me for 3 hours.
It's something that's very private. At least to me it is, because I poured like my heart into a campaign, and then it's very personal.
Yeah, it is very personal, and I think it's one of those things where that personal aspect is appealing to the audience that watches live streams. There's a lot of people who will comment on the games that I run or play in, because I also play in several live stream games as well, and they'll always say something like, oh, I have a bad day at work, and just like watching you guys have fun is like being in the room, and I think, to me, the best live streamed games are those that don't try to like be a show. I think there is a tension between a live stream game. Is it a game? Is it a TV show? Is it some sort of weird new television we don't know anything about yet? Like a weird reality game show. And I think like there's some people, particularly in the line of work that I do, where we work with producers and editors and people
Could you imagine like D&D being played in a Japanese game show?
Oh yeah, totally. I run a game on Wednesdays where the audience can donate money to add in enemies, to throw magical effects at the players. Like, it's a completely different style of game than like me sitting at home in the privacy of my home with like only 3 or 4 other people. Like, this one's like 80 or 90 people show up, and they might spend it's all kinds of currency in huge amounts to give people critical successes, critical fumbles, have an enemy show up, have a magic item show up, to curse a player, to whatever. And it's a very different game, and I really try to lean into it. And I made all the people in the chat NPCs. They're all demons, they're all like demons from outside reality who are attacking the party for various reasons. And I was just like, yeah, if this is the way the game is going to be, like, let's break down the walls between the audience and the players, and have the audience be elements in the game world. They're demons. They're not just a guy at work on his lunch break. That's a demon who's spending $5 to mess with a player. You're not going to. I think that's something new and unique that you're not going to get. It's not for everybody, and it's very difficult to DM. You're always on your toes. Prep for it is very different. But streaming in general, it offers people a chance who otherwise weren't able to play before, a way to watch, and a way to introduce themselves to the hobby in a way that works for them. And I don't know many people that just watch these. I know a lot of people who watch these and have played once or twice, or who watch these and that's what spurred them on to start a game group. I like watching live streamed games because the best ones remind me of the best times at my table. And as my life has evolved and changed, and I can't spend 8 hours with 6 or 7 other people, playing a game, I'm able to sort of watch others, particularly a show like Critical Role or some of the big ones, but some of the smaller ones as well, and get that feeling of like, oh yeah, there's like camaraderie here and people having fun together, and it feels genuine and feels like a the best ones, you feel like you've connected with them, and you're as invested in the characters and the plot that unfolds as anything else. And it's really kind of powerful and fun, and I'm glad it's around, because it's certainly helped WebDM. We've certainly been riding a wave of streamed and video content that's fresh and new to the hobby, and I'm liking it.
I could imagine. Well, on that note, let's wrap it up here.
All right.
I have had a great talk.
Excellent. I'm always surprised when anyone is like, tell me more about your imaginary worlds that you create, because in my mind they're just these silly little things that'll be used at a gaming table. So I really appreciate you having me on and talking about this.
It's something I find like so interesting to hear like other people's thoughts that go into creating worlds, because it can differ like beyond anything you know.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
It's insane what people put like there's all these indie like RPGs on Drive-Thru RPG where I would just scroll through and they were like plus 15 megabytes, so a lot of work have gone into them. Yeah.
Maybe. I'm sure there'll be a WebDM one on there one day as well.
Hopefully. I'll be waiting.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening in to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to subscribe to the channel, I really hope you do so, because I have some more coming up soon that, if you like this topic, you'll definitely love to subscribe. Thank you again for listening.